Hi all! I have received some anxious emails this week on finding sources for your final project. I know and understand that research is hard, but in our globalized society we must learn to find quality resources and present our own argument based on the information we have found. One of the learning outcomes for this course is development of research skills. As students, we are so often used to Googling a term and then finding a plethora of sites where we can copy information. I have been guilty of doing this a time or two myself. However, this is not academic research. Copying a web page and regurgitating it back to me will not serve your higher learning needs. With this project, I'm asking you to do true college research. Find quality primary and secondary sources to piece together an argument or a thesis of your own making. The first step to doing this is to find background information on your topic. Begin to understand the context of the time. Once you have done that, then start asking yourself questions that you could possibly research. To find background information, you will need to look at your textbook or other quality secondary sources on the subject. When you have questions in mind and an understanding of the person or event, then you begin to hunt for sources. And yes, it is a hunt. If we have covered the topic in taking sides or after the fact, then start there. Go to the end of the selections and look for the bibliographic information. From that list, do a search of the sources and see if you can find them in one of the databases. San Jose has an excellent library system with great databases that you can use with your library card. I constantly use the San Jose or Santa Clara County Library System with their award-winning library webpage. So Santa Clara Electronic Library 24/7, History, History Reference Center, 2,500 reference books, 170 history periodicals, 112,000 historical primary source documents. More. San Jose. California Local Room, Open Access, No Library Card, History Reference Center. That's the same thing in the Santa Clara Library. All great stuff. Academic search. You're set. Where are we? Searching databases is another skill that takes practice. I've included a few videos this week in the lecture that give tips for searching databases. EVC unfortunately does not subscribe to a good database for this project. But if you have a Santa Clara County or San Jose library card, you have access to excellent online historical databases through them. I suggest that you go to the Santa Clara County Library's History and Social Science e-resources for some great quality primary and secondary sources. For San Jose City Library, see the electronic resources under their research center. After you have a basic understanding of your topic, you should do a general query in a historical database to see what comes up. Once you find some articles, look at their bibliographies and then find some more. Then start to think of the primary sources that you would like to have for your topic and look specifically for them. Let me say that again. Then start to think about the primary sources that you would like to have for your topic and look specifically for them. In many databases, you can search for primary sources specifically. Remember that you have your annotated bibliography and that is a starting point. If you don't use the sources in your final project, that is okay, but you must start researching and figuring it out how it all fits together. Finally, not everything has to be accessed electronically. Go to the library and introduce yourself to a librarian. The librarians can point you in the right direction. Once you find a secondary source, skim it to see if it leads you to other primary and secondary sources. If you can't find the book electronically, many libraries have interlibrary loan programs, and you have plenty of time before the project's due to do interlibrary loan. I have posted a wiki in this week that is for the entire class use in this week's block. It lists great resources for this project. If you come upon a site that you think will help others, feel free to share it in the wiki. Right here. Thank you, Richard. Let me know if you have any questions. Research takes work. You guys are doing great. Don't be discouraged if you don't find something right away or find something when you Google it. And always try different search terms. I'll see you in the forums.